Welcome to ArtSpeak Television and Radio here at Westfield Community Programming Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB. I'm Mark Auerbach, our host for this show, who's half awake. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. And my guest today is Harry Rock, who is a familiar voice and face to folks in Westfield, not only for having worked with the YMCA for many, many years, but chairing the 350th anniversary celebration. And he has his own show here on WSKB and Westfield Community Programming called Rock on Westfield.
Right.
We've never had the chance to be on a program together at the same time, Harry, but it's really a treat for me.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. When I was driving down here today, and we were just commenting off the air that all the other show hosts and myself have crossed over, with activities in town, because most of us are very local oriented. We live in Westfield, or we focus and support a lot of different happenings in town, so we're always overlapping, and I've overlapped with just about everyone, and you're the only one who I do follow on Friday mornings, listening to you. I read your columns in the newspaper, but it never worked with you, or actually really personally really met you, and it's a delight to be with you today.
I follow your show as well, and I obviously know what's going on in Westfield, even though I've never lived in Westfield. I've been involved. I was working for the Springfield Symphony Orchestra when they started their summer pops at Stanley Park Center.
Oh, sure.
Back in the 80s.
Right.
And when I left the symphony to take a job in Florida, and I came back 4 months later not liking the job and started my own PR company for the first time, Stanley Park hired me to do some of their promotions.
Oh, my gosh.
I got to know people.
Yeah.
They continued with summer seasons even after the symphony backed away. They brought in the Hartford Symphony, and they brought in country western people and stuff like that. So I've always known about Westfield. And back in 2013, Patrick Berry coerced me to come write for the Westfield News and do theater reviewing and stuff like that. And then I really got to know the community very well. And I had worked with Bob Plass years and years ago, and and Denny Akins. So
Denny's awesome.
I knew the community, and I would say to people, well, we're in Westfield, and they go, well, we pass it on the pike going to, the Berkshires or whatever. And I was a real booster of Westfield because I'd been to Westfield and knew what was here, and the fact that it's a delightful community that people seem to just know that it's the exit after Barnes Airport.
Yes.
One of the reasons I wanted you to be on the show is not only because you're a community involved in so many different levels and boards and nonprofits and all that, but you have a music career. And I learned this one day when I was actually reading the Westfield News, and it was some concert, and it's with Harry Rock. And that Harry Rock, I didn't know that you did music, but you do a lot of it.
Well, yeah, and let me be right up front. I would not use the word career. I am a late-in-life musician. Never played an instrument, never sang through my youth. I was always very athletic, and so that's where I naturally gravitated towards. I was a basketball player in high school and my first couple of years at college, and then and when I got into my professional working life, I was always a YMCA guy. So it naturally gravitated because the Y provided me an opportunity to work out and stay fit. But I was always very interested in competition. So I got very involved in canoe racing and did very, very well in that. I have 2 books, and I have an instructional video out on that, and was inducted into the National American Canoe Association Paddle Sport Hall of Fame a few years ago. So that I was really proud of that. And then got very involved in Nordic ski racing, marathon ski racing. When I moved up here, I had grown up in Groton, Connecticut, got involved with the Y down in the coast there, and then moved to New Jersey with my wife to Westfield, New Jersey, and worked for the Y there. And then we eventually moved here when I became the director of the YMCA. And when we moved back here, I discovered, this is snow. I never lived in snow country before. And I said, well, you better find something to do to enjoy it because otherwise you're just going to endure it. So I got into Nordic skiing, which I loved, and then evolved into ski racing. So that filled my life. And then when I turned 60, I was at Springfield College at that point, running their YMCA Professional Studies program. I realized that as retirement life goes on, my athletic side is going to wane, and I really need to find something else. And I've always been interested in music. I love listening to music. Grew up with music. It's always on in our house. It's always on in the car, but never thought of myself as a musician. But I decided to try it because I don't have a strong creative side. I'm a linear, administrative, budgets and strategic planning, that boring kind of stuff. So I went down to Guitar Center in Manchester, bought a nice Taylor guitar, which I love, and bought some of these Learn to Play CDs, and then just started kind of hacking away on that, and eventually started going to open mics, which I found very stressful because I wasn't very good at that point. Even today, people say, you were hard to listen to back then, but you've really gotten a lot better. We enjoy you now. But really started doing the whole open mic scene, and really developed as a guitar player, and mostly just a strummer type of thing, and then singing. And I'd never sung before, but took a few lessons to kind of get me oriented on how to get started with singing, and Eva Capelli was a huge help to me with that. That really developed, and what I found was that I really enjoyed performing for people. And music is the common bond. It's the link that brings everyone together. I don't care where you come from, who you are, what walk of life you're in, what age group. Music bonds us all. It's just the type of music that you like. And so as I mentioned earlier, I'm not terribly creative, so I'm not a writer and I don't compose. But I said, there's so much great music out there. The volume of music that's out there was created by these amazing artists, and that should continue to be shared. So I focus on, I guess you would call my genre more folk rock, because I really come out of that folk generation of the mid-'60s, late 60s. I graduated high school in '70, so that was the explosion of rock and roll in the mid to late 60s. The Beatles are coming out, and the Beach Boys, and the Doors, and Steppenwolf, and Led Zeppelin, and all these amazing artists, and I'm listening to all of that, and that's the stuff that I listen to today. Now, I highly influenced by Bob Dylan. I just love his stuff, so I do a lot of his stuff, but the band, absolutely love them. Do a couple of Grateful Dead tunes. Neil Young, I love, do some of his tunes. That's that genre that I really focus on, and I really, really enjoy it.
We sort of grew up in the same time period, and although I studied music and theater and dance professionally and all of that, that was a different brand of music. And what I listened to away from that brand was all the groups that were coming up. And when I hear it today, I think back to when I first heard a particular song. Somebody was playing something from the Association.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Cherish and Windy, right, and all of that. That was my junior year in high school, first dance of the season in the fall. Cherish was like the number one song.
Oh, yeah.
They played it like 5 times during a school dance because everybody wanted a slow dance to Cherish. So when I'm driving around and I'm listening to oldies, I hear a piece of music or a popular song of the time. I remember when the Beatles came out and having a little transistor radio and playing the transistor radio late at night at home. And there was a AM station in Fort Wayne, Indiana, that came through the airwaves all the way to Long Meadow and played the Beatles nonstop.
Oh my gosh!
Late at night. So it brings me back to like 6th and 7th grade kind of thing. So I have a real appreciation personally for popular music, although in my work I don't get to do any kind of that.
Mm-hmm.
So where did you do your first performance?
I started in open mics. In East Hampton, there's a place called Luthier's, and they are really one of the top open mic venues, but it's very personal, and everybody's sitting there, and there's no outside noise. When you're up there on stage, everybody's looking at you, so it's very stressful. And so that's really where I got started, and it was hard for me. I'd come home from those things. I would have to have my music book up there because I was tied to it, and I couldn't remember lyrics and chords. And I'd say to my wife, I said, "Oh my God, I don't know why I'm doing this. This is so stressful. There's a stress factor. I haven't found the fun factor." But you know what? I was just always determined to get better at what I was doing, and I just kept going to the open mics, and then slowly got comfortable with that and was able to start to wean myself from the book, and then started to perform out. And the venues that I do, because of the interest, my music is late 60s, early 70s. People from my generation love that. Now, when I was at Springfield College, I was shocked to find out that my students at the time, who were also 18, 19, 20, love that music too, which surprised me. But mostly it's the generation that I grew up with. And so where I go are wineries. I do a lot of wineries, food festivals, farmers markets, definitely do some bars and restaurants. And I have a partner now that plays mandolin. We're called the Rock Duo, John Severance out of Springfield. And so his voice blends really well with mine, and the mandolin blends really well with the guitar. So I do a lot of solo stuff, but I do a lot of stuff with him. We've been together for about a year now.
You said that you get really nervous going up to perform. Don't you think that in a way that being nervous makes you give a better performance? Because I know that although I've stopped performing, when I get up and MC an event or something like that, if I'm not nervous, it doesn't go well. But if I have a little bit of stage fright and a little bit of nervousness that I'm trying to conquer in doing what I do, my performance overall is better.
Mark, you are so right. I always find that you always have a little bit of anxiety and stuff, and the stage fright isn't as bad as it used to be, but you still do. But it forces you up your game, and you really focus on leading up to for me it was like training for a race athletically. Yeah. You're playing and playing and playing and practicing all those songs that you're going to do for that set list up until the thing. And, even just before you go on, you're still, okay, that first song, make sure I got the right chord patterns. I got the right, as long as I got that first verse, then I'm good to go. But that nervousness does bring it out. And I think that that's just part of, if you are totally calm and going into it, either you're not playing up to something that's of your ability, or you're, maybe you think too much of yourself. I don't know, but I find that little bit of nervousness really helps.
Yeah, I learned that when I was doing in performance, and I had majored in theater, minored in dance and music all the way through undergraduate school, and then I did my graduate theater work at Yale Drama School, which was like one of the best in the country. And one of the professors said to me, if you're not nervous and that you don't have a little bit of anxiety about your performance, you're going to walk out there and you're not going to relate to the audience or whatever. I still get a bit nervous when I do an arts beat because in a way, both of us doing radio are performing to some degree.
You're exactly right.
And I find that if I'm not nervous, I make mistakes.
Right.
And the only time that I get real stage fright is when, and go beyond my comfort level, was a couple of years ago when Chester Theater asked me to interview a author who had written a book about musical theater as a fundraiser. And it was going to be live and it was going to be on their stage. And I read the book and I knew the material and the author, backwards and forwards. But walking out on that stage and seeing 300 people, I think it was less, it was probably 200 because the theater's small. My stage fright went to high anxiety. And I just was so sure that I was going to mess up, and these people who had paid $150 a head to benefit the theater were going to go, oh, he's awful. So it ended up that I improv'd a lot of the questions because I had written everything down on note cards to ask the questions, and then I left those in the car. So I was so nervous, I was completely unprepared.
Oh, that's funny.
And I did one of the better performances that I've ever done.
Yeah.
If I'm just walk in and think I can wing it, then I make a mistake.
Yeah, I think that the nervousness is just a natural part of performing or doing anything, and it's all about preparation. When I do my show here, I put 2 hours of prep time in before every interview that I do, and I'm thinking about, I have all my questions, everything lined out. I think in life, we all want to do our best. We do not want to go out and be judged and say, oh, that was adequate, but it wasn't very good. If you're out here, you come because you take pride in yourself. You want to be a strong representative for the organization that you're representing, in this case, WSKB and WCPC 15. You want to be respected and, I don't want to say revered, but certainly respected as a professional and somebody who is prepared and does the best that they can do. And the fact is that they can count on you to perform at that level, that whenever you come to the stage or whenever you come to the table, they know you're prepared. You're going to be ready. You're going to give your best. And I think that's huge.
And I always get nervous before every show. First of all, I wonder if everybody's going to show up.
Oh, yeah, right.
I do a lot of phone stuff, and at least since the pandemic began. And
Sure.
You wonder if they're going to be at the right phone number, and if they're we're going to be able to have a good
Right.
phone connection and things like that.
Right.
When I realize everything's going well and I kind of relax a little bit, that's when I make mistakes. So, I take a lot of pride, as you do, in the product that I'm putting out on radio
Absolutely.
and television.
Absolutely.
And I think, thankfully, we have this incredible studio here at
Oh,
Studio
it's
120.
phenomenal. Yeah.
And-
Thanks, Pete Coles.
And Pete Coles is such a great producer and has outfitted the studio with state-of-the-art stuff that gives us all the resources that
Right.
we have to do good programs.
Right.
So I'm nervous because I want to make sure that the listener or the viewer gets the best that I can offer, and that I bring on the best guests that I can have. And I know both of us have shows that are much watched and listened to.
Right.
So, and most of the other hosts here are doing their best to bring quality radio
absolutely.
and television.
Right.
And in the case of what we're all providing overall is we're hyper local. We're trying to be a constant media source for Westfield and the surrounding towns. My programming goes a little bit further because a lot of the arts venues that people
Right.
from this area attend are either in the Berkshires or Hartford.
Right.
So as a result, a lot of people in the Berkshires and in Hartford tune into my program where they might not even know where Westfield is.
Oh, yeah, sure.
necessarily.
That's a great point.
But one of them was an author that I had actually interviewed when I was sub-hosting for Patrick Berry. And Patrick was out for a couple of weeks and said, you come on and do it for me, and you can choose the guests you want. And it was an author, nationally known, who found out that we have in Westfield a locally owned independent bookseller. Now, Springfield doesn't have one. And you would assume in a bigger city that there would be some. There used to be, but that puts Westfield on the map. It's such a unique community. So a lot of people that I chat with on the air are learning about Westfield as the course of it, whether they come in here to Studio 120 or not, and they find out, there's an independent coffee shop downtown, and there are good restaurants, and there's so much going on here that maybe all of us are helping to put Westfield on the map a little bit.
The cool thing about Westfield is, and I'm going to start on more global, the Pioneer Valley is just so rich with music and musicians. It's just amazing. And as I've gotten out there and gotten connected and attended a lot of the different open mics and the different performances and stuff, I've gotten to know a lot of these artists. And I just sit in awe of just how good they are. And right as well, here in Westfield, it's amazing to me how many great artists we have. And there's a little, up until the Corona thing hit, we've had a real pocket of musical activity. We have open mics on the Green in the summertime. There's Gaslight Entertainment at the Women's Club now with Patrick Berry and Pete Cole, with JPEG Luca. Just amazing what they're doing there. Number of open mics throughout the community. But there's a lot of great musicians here, and so it's really been fun to be a part of that, and also recognize, I get a call regularly, asking me to perform at different events because people know, it's all about branding. They used to know me as the Y guy, and then they knew me as the Westfield 350 guy, and oh yeah, we've seen Harry at the Westfield Food Festival playing up on the big stage or whatever, and oh, he plays. Yeah, can you play for this or play for that? I do a lot of benefit stuff for the Boys and Girls Club or the YMCA or any other organizations in town that need stuff. And it's just, music is it's either background and provides a nice atmosphere for people to participate in whatever they're doing, or as the featured artist.
Yeah. And it's not just music, but theater, filmmaking,
Right.
dance, all of the creative arts and economy really are prevalent in all of Western Massachusetts.
They really are.
As we're going through the pandemic, everything like Tanglewood is canceled, Jacob's Pillow, Williamstown, most of the arts organizations in the Berkshires are not performing this summer. And the economic impact of that is really killing the creative economy. And a lot of these people have moved here because they can do great work in the area,
right.
or they can commute to New York or Boston if they have
right.
to, but they have the quality of life here. So we're very rich in what they call the creative economy, and certainly the people that come from Westfield, past and present. Westfield was the home of a twice Tony-nominated actress, Ann Petoniak, who created the play Night Mother on Broadway back in the 80s. They're the Burrage brothers, Nick and Josh, who are in Broadway shows that are from Westfield. And they come back constantly. And there are people from, as I've noticed lately, from the Berkshires. There's a whole list of New York and Hollywood people that moved to the Berkshires to make it their home. Karen Allen is from Raiders of the Lost Ark and Animal House is one of the more famous. Deborah Jo Rupp from that 70s show on TV.
Oh, my goodness.
Lives in Lee. Cynthia Wade, the Oscar-winning filmmaker, lives in the Berkshires. Others like David Adkins, who's going to be on this program today, resident, does a lot of New York theater, but lives in the Berkshires. So people have been drawn here to Western New England to live and work. And so that makes the area rich, because if we didn't have all this music and we didn't have all this theater, we wouldn't have the people that are involved in it making music and theater all the time.
Yeah, no question at all. It's going to be hard going forward. I follow a lot of my musician friends who are working musicians. It's not like me. I do this because I enjoy it, but I don't need to do it as a living. But a lot of the friends that I've created over the last few years are working musicians, and they're struggling right now because they can't work anywhere. And they're talking about the fact that even when the restaurants come back at 40% capacity, restaurants aren't going to have the money to pay musicians to come in and play for 3 hours. And where do you set up? And music is just going to be impacted on a big level around here. But to your point, though, the number of quality musicians and noteworthy musicians, it just is astounding. The Pioneer Valley and the Berkshires, it's just a wonderful area to live.
And also, a lot of people that listen to Artsbeat are in Northern Connecticut, because Hartford is a huge theater and music town.
Sure.
But even in the Litchfield Hills, just west of Hartford, there's the Infinity Hall Bistro.
I've been there. Yeah.
And there's so many venues for performance here that are music based and not just classical. Everybody thinks Tanglewood or the Springfield Symphony or the UMass Fine Arts Center, but there are all these, like the Barn in Egremont always has local singers on, and there's Methuselah in Pittsfield where you see major names performing, and or in Northampton, the Iron Horse.
Oh yeah, sure.
These venues are going to have a rough time recovering, and they're not on the list to open. They're not first on the list or second or third, but they're most likely fourth.
Right, and even then it's going to be really difficult. The thing that even when venues get open, I think that it's going to be a while before the public is comfortable comfortable about coming out and being around other people because they know the virus is there. And until we have a vaccine that you can count on, until we really see the curve really dissipate, it's gonna take a while. It's gonna be a huge impact.
So, are you doing any online performing? A lot of musicians have turned to doing living room concerts from home. Have you considered doing any of that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't yet been thinking about it. Of course, I'm so entertained by all my friends that are doing it, so I've been keeping busy with that. But to your point, I have had a couple of opportunities. Just did one a couple of weeks ago, and I've got one next week that I'm doing. There's some groups that I do perform for that are having these Zoom meetings, and so they've asked me to come on and perform as part of Zoom. So the first Zoom performance I did was a disaster because I hadn't found the original sound tab that you have to click on in order to keep the music from fading and spiking, and it just didn't sound very good. And so did a little research, talked to some other musicians, and then did a trial run with this group that I'm working with right now, and it worked really well. So they've got me slated to come and do a Zoom performance for them next week. So yeah, absolutely. Been thinking a lot about that. Oh my gosh, how could I have forgotten that? So Pete Coles, along with Kenny Stomsky and JPEG Luca, what the viewers can't see right now is we have an amazing soundstage for musicians.
We do, and I actually had them all on a couple of weeks ago, and then got a chance to see one of the concerts online.
Right.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, and so I was one of John Severance and I, as the rock duo, came in, and we did a Facebook Live and were recorded. And actually, this is our week. Each week, a different group or band or duo or solo artist is highlighted, and that's kind of your week when on WSKB and certainly on WCPC 15. You're constantly being shown, and so this has been our week. So it's been fun for me to constantly flip back to Channel 15 and see myself and John playing on the air.
And it's on Westfield WCPC's
Westfield Cable Channel.
YouTube
Yes.
channel, where people can go and catch some of these Studio 120 sessions.
Yeah, the 120 sessions have been phenomenal, and just credit goes to Pete Coles and JPEG Luca. Jay has all this equipment that he has been so generous to help us out for all kinds of. He was a huge help to me with the Westfield 350. He was on my board of directors at the time, but because all their concerts are gone, he said, well, you know what, let's set it up here. They had this brainchild. Bands can't wait to come here and play. They're doing this as a volunteer. They're not getting paid, but everybody's itching to perform, and there's such a cool setting here. You've got this unbelievable soundboard. You've got wedges for monitors. We've got 3 cameras. We got this light truss going on. It is as professional as you can get for recording yourself and getting a nice YouTube that you can use, recording that you can use for future publicity.
Obviously use it to self-promote.
Absolutely.
But more than that, some of the Pete Cole said that some of the people are doing Facebook Live while they're recording.
That's exactly
right.
So
their fans and other people can see what goes on behind the scenes to get music on stage, because you don't think about that when you walk into a club or a restaurant. All the equipment's already there, and you don't get to see the setup or how the lights work or somebody warming up or doing a sound check. And to me, that's kind of the exciting part of a concert.
Well, the funny thing is the Facebook Live thing, it's exactly that. It's raw footage. It's talking back and forth. Which song do you want to do next? Or waiting for them to come in. Wait a minute, we got to adjust something. It's raw footage, but it's very entertaining. It's not the polished diamond that you're normally used to seeing. You're looking at raw footage and all the interactions and the stuff that goes on behind the scene, setting up, doing your tuning and things. It's really fun to watch. And then what they do is they take this interview and they intersperse the songs with the interview, and it creates this beautiful
the
diamond.
final product is really terrific.
It's phenomenal.
And again, I'm overwhelmed by the quality of the musicians that are participating. I'm just really impressed.
Very, very high
We
level.
are out of time, Harry, but I want to thank you for coming on. I am a fan of your show.
Well, thank you so much, as I am yours.
Well, thank you very much. And hopefully we'll get to talk again soon. I'll be glad to come on Rock on Westfield anytime.
I'm sitting here thinking, okay, we're going to go tit for tat here, and I'm going to definitely have you on as a guest myself. So this will be fun. This was a fun interview.
Thank you so much. This is Harry Rock, who's our guest for this segment of Arts Beat. Harry Rock's show is called Rock on Westfield. You can find it archived on the Westfield WSKB Community Radio YouTube page. We're going to take a brief moment to acknowledge the underwriters that make Arts Beat and Harry's show and all the other programming here possible on both Westfield Community Programming Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB. Peter Coles is our chief engineer today. I'm Mark Auerbach, and we will be back with more Arts Beat shortly.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield. Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years. Specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield. Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Bay State Dental. Comprehensive dentistry at 14 convenient locations in Springfield, Chicopee, Longmeadow, West Springfield, Belchertown, East Longmeadow, Ludlow, Northampton, Greenfield, and Wilbraham, as well as 29 Broad Street in Westfield. Bay State Dental makes it a priority to help you achieve and maintain the healthy smile you deserve. On the web at baystatedental.com.
Hi, this is Harry Rock, host of Rock on Westfield every fourth Wednesday at 8 a.m. Tune in for my view of this place I call home.
Community Radio
89.5 WSKB.
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back, everyone, to Arts Beat. I'm Mark Auerbach, and Peter Coles is our chief engineer. Our next guest today is somebody who has been involved in theater and acting and playwriting in the theaters among the Berkshires for decades. He probably started in the Berkshires as a young kid. I had the opportunity to go up to Berkshire Theater Group back 2 years ago when they were celebrating their 90th anniversary. And Patrick Berry and I and Peter Coles took a crew up to Berkshire Theater Group. We actually taped a bunch of interviews from the Fitzpatrick main stage. And it was my first opportunity to meet David Adkins, the actor and playwright, who I had seen in so many shows, and not only as a reviewer, but just as a theater goer. And I think the first show that I saw him in, and David will tell me the year that it happened, was a play called The Hasty Heart, which as a drama student, I had read and never seen performed. A couple of years ago, David wrote a play about Henry David Thoreau, which I had a chance to see. And I've seen him just about every year, had a chance to interview him a couple of years ago and loved it. David, welcome to Arts Beat again.
Mark, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with you.
Where are you sheltering in place right now during this little pandemic?
I am in New York City, the center of it all right now, and I'm in my kitchen looking down at a rather empty street. So I'm in New York City.
So are you planning to get up to the Berkshires this summer, or is everything on hold?
Well, I'm definitely planning on getting up to the Berkshires. I happen to have a home there as well, but everything is on hold. As you know, we're in the midst of this extraordinary event that of our lifetimes, and this amazing, beautiful cultural event that happens on a yearly basis, primarily in the summers, has suddenly come to a crashing halt, and I think a lot of us are in shock, but it's not going to keep me away from the Berkshires. I will find my way up there, but I think the the lingering feeling is that even when we're not in the Berkshires and, you know, the amazing cultural institutions that we have there that bring, you know, thousands and thousands of people to that area is still very much in our hearts. So I know it's a cliche, but it's really the truth. A lot of us feel very deeply connected to the Berkshires and all that's going on there.
I feel very connected as well. And, it's very difficult for me as an arts reporter and a theater reporter to not have the opportunity to see live theater. The last show I saw was actually on Broadway at the end of February and haven't seen the show since. I went through a period of time last summer when I was recovering from an accident and I missed several months of theater going, and I miss the live theater. But the thing that I found to be kind of cool is the fact that so many of our theater groups, Berkshire Theater Group included, have switched to online programming, some of it which is very, very unique. And you're hosting a weekly program for Berkshire Theater Group online.
I am. I'm doing a show called Casual Fridays, and first, basically what it is, it's an interview show, and I have to say, Mark, my hat is off to you. I really now have a completely new appreciation and understanding for your expertise, and I don't say that lightly. What I'm doing is my idea originally was keeping us all connected, one artist at a time. I think a lot of us as actors and designers and technicians and front of house people and our audience are feeling very disconnected. Of course, you know, we've been isolated in our houses, but I think this feeling of isolation in some ways might become more pronounced as we begin to come out of our shells, so to speak, out of our safe zones, and we find that we don't have a lot of the experiences that we're used to, which is live theater. And so my impulse was to keep us all connected as we go through this extraordinary event. And I think it's also something, you know, that our audiences want to be a part of, because I think they see actors as kind of these extraordinary creatures, which I believe we are, and they like to see who we are and what we are, besides just being people up on a stage.
Well, one of the things that I found interesting is that there is so much online theater activity now, not only streaming of performances from theaters around the world, but things like what you're doing on Berkshire Theater Group, and there are other people that are doing things in other theaters. You get to know some of the theater community one-on-one basis. And for me, personally, I've had an opportunity. I just finished taping a 10-part series called How We're Doing, which airs both on 89.5 FM WSKB and Westfield Community Programming Channel 15, where I've been able to extend the kind of reporting that I do beyond the arts community to videographers and marketing people, how they're coping with the COVID pandemic, how their lives have changed. And we're all getting to know each other a little bit more as people. When I go to see a show on the stage, I don't necessarily know the actors that are performing or their backgrounds, but when I get to talk to them about their reactions, the reasons that they're in theater or anything like that, it just enhances my appreciation of the art.
Yeah, exactly. They're as connected as we are to the performers as an audience. There is a separation, and I think that this has been a great opportunity for us to transcend that imaginary barrier that is part of this business. I think I know that actors are always looking for the light, so to speak, and this is certainly one of those instances where theater goers do get a chance to peek behind the curtain, so to speak, and experience what we're going through at the same, in the present moment. But also, a lot of us are not being stymied by this event that has been thrust upon us. It's hard to keep actors quiet. It's hard to keep writers from picking up the pen. The musicians are still playing in their apartments, and as we've seen, we have some Broadway stars singing from their balconies. We are not quiet. We are still, we might be sheltered, but we are completely trying to be creative in a whole new set of parameters. And I think it's interesting for audience members, particularly, to have a sense of what we're all up against and what we're doing to thrive as we try to piece through this confusing time.
One of the things that somebody had said to me they found the most interesting about watching the program that you're doing on Fridays or some of the other stuff that's being generated online is they're getting to see how people decorate their homes, what kind of books are on their bookshelves, and get an idea of that we're all just human beings, whether we're in theater as a profession or whatever, we're all human beings. And there was that Sondheim retrospective saluting his 90th birthday a couple of weeks ago where people were singing.
Right.
And Laura Benanti was singing from her bathroom, and Bernadette Peters sang a cappella from her kitchen. And you get the human side of the arts.
Exactly. And I have to admit, the first show I did, I went through an hour or more of trying to decide which corner of my apartment I wanted to have in the background. I mean, we all, I think about it. Except what I loved is my first guest, Stephen DeRosa. He didn't at all, which I thought was so wonderful. He just opened his computer and started talking. And, his background was his apartment. He hadn't necessarily, placed the lamp in the perfect spot. And I found that to be just really wonderful. Each person who comes on, are their own character, of course. And the backgrounds give us a sense of who a person is, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, when I come in here to the studio to do radio and television, usually the background is a slide or a photograph or something like that. And
Sure.
But when I've gone to Zoom meetings of late, I realize that I'm so concerned with how clean my apartment is before I go on the air. I never thought about that when I did radio or TV before. It never even occurred to me. I got a question. How did you first get to the Berkshires? I mean, you've been at primarily Berkshire Theater Group, but I've seen you perform opposite your wife at Wham and the Bakelite Masterpiece, and you've done theater in other theaters. But what brought you here initially?
I was a student at Dartmouth College, and I guess the best way to put it is I didn't know why I was there. I was in college because college came after high school. And I basically wasn't a very happy camper. And a friend of mine had on his coffee table an application for the Berkshire Theater Group, and it was to be an apprentice. And I filled it out and sent it in and forgot about it. And then suddenly I got this letter in the mail that said I'd been accepted as an apprentice. I arrived. I was probably the oldest apprentice on record. And I had absolutely the most amazing summer of my life. I'd always enjoyed acting. I'd always felt that I wanted to be an actor, but that certainly makes no sense to parents or to someone who had been, basically groomed in a prep school to go on and become a doctor or a lawyer. And suddenly I was at the Berkshire Theater Festival, and I had this experience that was absolutely transformative, which I think it is for many apprentices and interns who come to the theater, and all theaters. I hope, and I met this actor, David Schramm, who saw me in an apprentice show, and he said, "Have you ever thought about getting some training?" And I said, "Training for what?" And he said, "For acting." And I said, "No, I'm going to go back to Dartmouth and, become a businessman or a lawyer or a doctor." And he said, "Well, I went to the school called Juilliard." And I said, "You mean the music school?" And he said, "Yeah, well, they also have a training program for actors." And I sent in an application for Juilliard, and I learned 2 monologues. I went in, and the rest is history. So I came as an apprentice in 1985, I think it was. And I've been coming back off and on ever since.
And you've done a whole variety of roles, but you also wrote a play, the one about Thoreau. Have you written other plays besides that?
I've written some short pieces. I'm working on adapting a story for a holiday show. The truth is, I don't consider myself a writer, really. I've written some plays. I've had some mixed success with them. I'm primarily an actor. I have worked with some of the great playwrights in our time, and so I'm very careful to. I really feel that I have a sense of who the writers are, and I'm not one of them. Will I continue to create and write plays? I'm pretty sure I will. I think in this environment with the internet and all of the content that's being produced, as an artist, you almost have to be. When I came out of Juilliard, it was a time when actors were actors. There were some people who, morphed over into writing and certainly producing. But now, as I encourage all my students with this, is that we have to be responsible for our own creativity, and we have to be prepared to create our own content. So, yes, I've written some things, but I feel I tread lightly on the word, am I a writer? I am certainly a work in progress in that arena.
You've performed in contemporary plays, both comedy and drama, and classics. Are there any performances that you've done that or plays that you've been in that are hallmarks of what you real success that you've been really proud of, or ones that are the most memorable to you?
Oh boy, it's hard to answer that. There are a number of them. I think the way I'll answer that for you is the ones that feel like a personal success because the show, for one reason or another, terrified me, and I was able to transcend that terror. And I think we had some success with those shows, and those are namely Waiting for Godot, which really terrorized me. Stephen DeRosa, my first guest, was in it. We talk about it on the show. Waiting for Godot. Also, the play I did last summer, The Goat, by Edward Albee. That one was pretty terrifying, too. And there's always, for me, there's always a feeling, what is an audience going to think about this? Because ultimately, we want an audience to have a good time, I guess, is one way of putting it. And a man having an affair with a goat and his family watching his family disintegrate around the event seemed, terrifying, frightening.
It was one of the shows that I wanted to see so much last summer, and unfortunately couldn't go because I was still in rehab at that point. But
right.
I did take my mother a couple of years before she passed away to see it in New York. She wanted to go see that. She wanted to go see that play with Sally Field in it. She was a Sally Field junkie, and I said, "Mom, I know what it's about, and I'm not sure. It's not a musical, and it's not a comedy necessarily. Are you sure you want to go see it?" She goes, "Well, I just want to see Sally Field." So I took her to a Wednesday matinee. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to push her to an early grave. But she loved it and talked about it for days afterwards and how clever it was and everything else. And I thought, after seeing that, I really wanted to see it at Berkshire Theater Group to see how Eric Hill, who I've worked with over the years, we were at Stage West together, and he's one of my favorite directors. And I wanted to see how it would play out. And I'm so sorry that I missed it.
Yeah, I think we had quite a good success with it. The thing I always remember or remind myself, when you're working with a master or two masters, so to speak, the first being Edward Albee, you've got great material. So even when it's terrifying you have an understanding that others have had, quote unquote, success with it, that the play does work. But then you have the added element of, is this the kind of play that will fly with an audience in the Berkshires? And then, of course, you have the other open questions, which are who you're doing it with, and having Eric at the helm is really, it really calms the waters, at least until you get into the rehearsal room when things start to heat up. But, working with Eric is a joy and a pleasure. We've done so many plays together. In fact, we had done Zoo Story the year before, 2 years before.
I think I want to think that when we were at Berkshire Theater Group doing a live show or series of tapings there, that you were in rehearsal for that.
Yes, I think we were. And that the success of Zoo Story kind of led to us doing The Goat. Working with Eric on some of this really tricky material has been a joy. We have kind of a what do they call it? A shorthand in the rehearsal room, and sometimes we each feel that we are reading the other's thoughts. I mean, he'll say, "David, why don't you try?" And I go, "I know. I'll do it right now. Let me. I think it's a great idea." And he hasn't even said what it is, and we've both kind of gotten the idea in that moment. So those kinds of relationships are rare, and they're relationships that we yearn for in the theater. And along with having completely new blood in the room as well. So we had Jennifer Van Dyke, who was just absolutely extraordinary in The Goat, and my compatriot in arms in Zoo Story, Joey Collins, whom I hadn't worked with, was, having new blood in the room and old blood it really can lead to, I think, really good product.
Yeah, you've been very lucky to work with a lot of great people in your career here. If things return, if the theater this summer returns, Berkshire Theater and Barrington Stage are both hoping at this point in time to launch their seasons in August. But if it returns, will you be part of the Berkshire Theater or Barrington Stage seasons this year?
That is to be determined. I'm hoping to be in Nightingale. I wasn't originally slated to be in that. I was going to be doing Uncle Vanya, directed by David Auburn, which, that felt like, it was a loss. Yes, we will be doing it again. Will we be able to get the same creative team back together in a year's time? We'll see. I think there's so many moving pieces right now for all of us that it's basically to be determined. But I am hoping to be in Nightingale if that works out for everyone involved, which I had not originally slated to have been in.
Yeah.
And it'd be great to be in that play at this time.
How far in advance are you booked up in a normal circumstance?
It just depends. It really depends. I sometimes have absolutely nothing and I'm staring at the phone. And other times I know well in advance that I have maybe one or two pieces coming up. When I do television, I have no idea. My career is not at that level at all. This year I was on Madam Secretary and the show Evil. Madam Secretary, I knew I was going to be on that, 3 weeks in advance for Evil. It was, 7 days notice. So it just depends, the life of an actor is, I guess for many of us, not all of us, but for many of us, it's precarious. I have been very fortunate that I have a lot of relationships at this point in my life where people do think of me, and in a way, it's good for someone like myself with established relationships in this world of how are we going to be doing auditions, that I will probably be on some people's lists of people who are just, taking offers, who are getting offers. However, there are, I think we're all going to be back in audition rooms in one way or another, probably on tape, and sooner than actually being in the rooms with people. And we will see how that goes.
David, we're about out of time here. I just wanted to remind people that your show airs on Fridays, and information about it is available at Berkshire Theater Group's website, which is berkshiretheatergroup.org. Who are a couple of the guests that you're going to have on in the coming weeks?
Well, today, being Friday, I have Jen Harris, who is an amazing actress. She's a Lortel and Theater World Award winner for Modern Orthodox, and she was in the film Gaby, and she has a YouTube series called New York is Dead. She's very well known.
And she's well known around here for theater works for Christmas on the Rocks. So I've interviewed her several times. Great actor.
Yes, and she's an amazing person as well. She's really a go-getter, and she is one of the people who creates her own work, and which is wonderful. I'm hoping to get David Auburn to come on and talk about what's happening for writers these days. I'm hoping to have Greg Edelman, who's a 4 or 5-time Tony-nominated performer who also directs at the Berkshire Theater Group. So, and then I'm going to have people that aren't so well known, who are behind the scenes, technicians and designers who we might not all know, and which will give us a whole different take on the theater experience.
That's great. David, thanks for joining us. David Adkins is the actor and playwright. You can often see him at Berkshire Theater Group and some of the other theaters in Western New England. He's kind of a local now after all these years. Thanks for being with us. That wraps up this edition of Artsbeat TV and Radio. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. I'm Mark Auerbach. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next Friday at 8 a.m.
What's that? It sounds familiar.
It should. We heard it a few hours ago at the plaza.
Well, not quite the plaza. The foyer of the plaza.
That's close enough.
No, it isn't. But for us, it'll have to do.
It took Wilbur Wright years to learn to build something that flew. But my heart took flight in no time by spending a moment with you. It took Fred Astaire years to learn to tap tap out that tattoo. But I danced on air in no time by spending a moment with you. The look in your eyes was a pleasure, my personal treasure was in it. J.P. Morgan works weekends, I got rich in a minute. It took Sigmund Freud years to learn what makes people feel blue. But I'm overjoyed, I avoid being low just by spending a moment with you. It took
Wilbur Wright.
Wilbur
He
Wright
worked every night.
years to learn
to build something that
flew.
until he didn't blue.
But my
heart was light.
heart took flight
In no time by spending a moment with you.
It took
Fred
Fred
Astaire.
Astaire
And he's pretty bad.
years to learn to tap out that tattoo.
That rhythmic tattoo.
But I
I
danced on air in no time by spending a moment with you. The look in your eyes was a pleasure, my personal treasure was in it. J.P. Morgan works weekends, I got rich in a minute. It took
Mr. Freud.
Sigmund Freud
He got quite annoyed.
years to learn
Learn
what makes people feel
unhappy and blue.
But
I'm free as a boy.
overjoyed,
My cares are destroyed. I avoid being low
just by spending a moment with you. A moment with you. A moment with you. A moment with, a moment with, a moment with, a moment with you.